We are live. Thank you for tuning in. I'm Naijha Wright Brown, host of Naijha Speaks, where I help you find your vegan soul through food, people, events, and culture. We're in the final days of Veganuary, so if you pledge to go vegan this month, or if you're already vegan, I'd like to know how your pledge is going or how you influence someone to go vegan. Public relations as activism. Here's what we're talking about today. Is there a shift in perspective happening? Here to talk to us more about it is Ryan Fletcher, a dedicated vegan and social justice activist of over 20 years. That's 2 decades. Founder and director of Movement Media and director of public relations for Dr. Bronner's The Soap and now chocolate maker. Welcome, Ryan. How are you doing today?
I'm doing great. I'm really excited to be here. I thank you so much for having me. I'm a huge fan of your work, both Land of Kush and Black Veg Society and this show. And I've always enjoyed our conversations. So I'm happy to be having this one.
Oh, thank you for taking the time out to be here because I know you're really busy. Public relations, please tell us, how did you get into it? What is the story?
All right. Well, my story is a bit of an unconventional one. I never really thought, when I was younger, I never really thought about what my career path would be. I got into activism really young, and for the longest time, I knew that that's what I wanted to do, to be involved in change work, whether it was community service work in DC, working with unhoused populations, or stuff around veganism and animal rights. And then I ended up kind of falling into this career path, which was an outgrowth of various activist work I'd been doing since I was a teenager. And at the time, doing freelance communications work felt unconventional. And, now with the rise of startup economies and the gig economy and freelance stuff, it's, sometimes I feel like everybody I meet has their own little, consulting firm or whatever.
Right.
I first got into this. So I didn't think it was something I could actually do. And then a bunch of different opportunities presented themselves. So like I said, it kind of started when I was a teenager. I love music. DC has a really rich, robust, independent and punk rock music scene, and especially did when I was growing up. I got involved in that stuff, and that music was really politically engaged and socially conscious. So you couldn't go to a show to see a band without there being a table full of literature and information about things like veganism, animal rights, anti-war causes, human rights, how to combat local community issues, how to combat racism, sexism, et cetera. So I was just kind of exposed to a lot of this social consciousness. And that really led me to activism. And it got me started organizing first benefit concerts for organizations that need funds and resources, which is still a big part of my work today. And actually, one of the ways we met is through my philanthropy in the animal rights movement. And then I got into organizing protests. And with both of those things, there was an element of always needing to compel people to attend, educate people while they're there, be able to speak to the media about why you're doing these events and try to kind of elevate the platform for attention. And so I got drawn into that, and I got drawn into the communication side of things, and particularly how to talk about issues in a way that kind of breaks through status quo thinking, compels people to care, to change their mind or behavior, and ultimately to take action. And then in my early 20s, I got really involved in the global justice movement, which was this huge groundswell of activity around confronting corporate greed and international trade agreements and the ways they enforce global poverty and violate human rights and hurt the environment and animals. So all these issues like ending mass incarceration, reforming drug policy, combating police brutality, again, racism, sexism, homophobia, were all sort of bound up in this movement. And then 9/11 happened. And then a new anti-war movement emerged around the opposition to the wars in Iraq and Afghanistan. And so in DC, it was a big hub for movements coming together and regular protests. And just as a volunteer, as a local grassroots activist, I was involved in a lot of this organizing of these events. And again, drawn to the communication side. And the more communications work I did on this, the more I met other folks in other organizations that were kind of in need of communication support. And the professional side of it began when me and a group of friends realized that it was only particularly big nonprofits and NGOs that actually had access to like real dedicated communication strategy work. And so we had the idea of having a PR firm that could be hired by a group with a fraction of the budget of a group that normally has a PR firm. And so we started this media collective that was really, really focused on giving ourselves a way to earn some income without, having to do jobs outside of what we were really passionate about. So at the time, we'd do our activism and then we'd have like a dog walking job or, work at a coffee shop or whatever. But having to kind of split your attention like that makes you kind of less effective. So we had to figure out like, okay, well, how can we make some money and still be committed to the causes we did? So this thing was called Mintwood Media Collective. And we started that in around 2000. And I did that for about 13 years. And that was my first business. And it was really it was my first business, but it was also the place where I met a lot of the folks on relationships I have to this day.
So you have, you founded Movement Media. So did that grow into Movement Media? Is that the Movement Media?
So I was a part of this thing called Mintwood Media, and it was an employee owned and run operation. So it was worker owned. And so, the idea was kind of equal pay, equal say. There was about 4 or 5 of us, and we would all bring our own clients, and then we'd pool the money, cover expenses, kind of split what was left. And it was really a way to kind of challenge typical economies and try to have a flatter power structure around the way decisions were made and things like that. Around 2013, the collective has sort of dwindled down to just 2 of us, and we've kind of found ourselves running more of just a traditional, 2-person business. And we had also felt like we had kind of taken it as far as we could go as that entity. And my business partner at the time wanted to move into policy work. He's done a lot of incredible stuff around ballot initiatives, helping to legalize cannabis in DC, work around the minimum wage. So he really went into that. I was really passionate about continuing the communication strategy work. And we had this portfolio of clients that needed us to continue to work with them. Particularly Dr. Bronner's, but also Fair World Project, a lot of folks in the natural products industry. And what I wanted to do was build something that had a little bit more of a robust infrastructure, where we were able to bring in enough resources to really offer really good compensation, really good benefits, and kind of really build a team that could, really truly do our best work for clients and stuff. And I had learned, I sort of got into business accidentally with this first one. I never really thought about doing it. And then when 13 years went by and it was time to create Movement Media, I actually felt like, okay, well, I have the skill set for PR work, but I also know how to run an effective business, be a good employer for people who need an outlet for their work. And so we were really set up to start this. And so our mantra as a business is we are activists at heart and publicists by trade. And primarily what we do is we exist to amplify unheard narratives and really put communication structure in place to sustain and grow movements and the participation in the movements by the organizations that we partner with. And I really love the aspect of being a business owner that allows me to provide an outlet for fellow activists to do the work they're driven to do and make a living at the same time. So one thing we have in common across our team, it's a diverse team in terms of age, and demographics, but we're all people who are really passionate about using our work life to try to make a difference in different movements.
Love it. And then, your connection with Dr. Bronner's now, and how that came. I've known Dr. Bronner's product since I was 6, and the whole All One, the the slogan and just what they're all about, and the products, high quality. Talk to us about your role at Dr. Bronner's and some of the impacts that you made being the director of public relations for them.
Yeah, absolutely. So Dr. Bronner's is one of my core focuses at Movement Media, and we're true partners with them. Movement Media actually runs Dr. Bronner's public relations department, and we call it public affairs and media relations, particularly because on the public affairs side, a lot of what Dr. Bronner's does behind this all one message is use the platform of being this relatively well-known and beloved company, frankly, to elevate causes it believes in. So Dr. Bronner's is committed to regenerative organic agriculture, animal rights and animal advocacy, drug policy reform, doing a lot around community betterment in San Diego area, a lot around environmental change, and also criminal justice reform. Those are some of the core issues the company works on, and it has a business structure that allows it to put a lot of resources into social movements. So there's a salary cap at the company. One of the main priorities of the company is that the supply chain is organized in a way that seeks to elevate all the people involved in the supply chain and also the workforce by offering really strong benefits, including full health care, which is company paid and relatively unheard of in the United States, a place that does not offer healthcare to its citizens, unlike most of the rest of the world. And so Dr. Bronner's also has this salary gap of 5 to 1. And the 5 to 1 means that no executive will get paid more than 5 times the lowest paid fully invested employee. And so with the resources that it has from that sort of social vision of social equity, it's able to dedicate basically everything that's not needed for business development to all those causes I mentioned. And so the PR work that we do is largely oriented around, to some extent, promoting products, because you got to do that, right? But mostly what we do is we try to create partnerships with on-the-ground activists who are doing work, help share resources with them, and then promote those causes. So a lot of times we'll put those causes on our label. We've done a lot around the subject of mental health. So we did these Heal Soul special labels. We've done a Heal Earth special label. We have one that says End Factory Farming on it. And so, I should also mention it's Dr. Bronner's 75th anniversary this year. So the company was created in 1948.
Happy anniversary. Yes.
Yeah. So the company was created by Emanuel Bronner, whose grandsons run the company to this day. And Emanuel Bronner's whole thing was this all one message, right? He called it the moral ABC. And it's the thousands of words that you see on the label of Dr. Bronner's bottle. And so part of the big challenge of the company is how to take all the words that are on the bottle and figure out how to really actualize them in our spheres of influence. So we're actually, you might say walking the talk. And a lot of that relates back to the kind of public relations work that both Dr. Bronner's prioritizes and that I sort of specialize in. So, and Dr. Bronner's, we met these folks through Midwood Media back in 2002. So, back then they were about a $4 million company with 15 employees. And today they're about a $180 million company with 300 employees.
Wow.
So we've really grown with them and kind of helped be a part of that growth, but also, their growth has, led to my growth in a lot of ways and in terms
my growth,
of how I do my work, the way I think about my effectiveness and all these kinds of things. So it's a great relationship and a really beautiful company. And I think that one of the things now that we try to do with the company more established is put it out there as a model and hope other companies can kind of look at some of the ways that Dr. Bronner's operates and, and seek to kind of take it on, and model some of those examples themselves.
Well, the products are great. And that End Factory Farming, I remember being sent some sample, lots of sample. I mean, that's the almond pure castle. So
Yeah.
all our employees were in love. Like that was like the best. We got to get more of that. We got to get sent more of that because
Yeah.
it was just an incredible smell, and the purpose behind it, the end factory farming. You know, I got to connect with you all again and get some of that. How does using public relations to change narratives? I mean, we know you hear that being
Yeah.
narrative differ from using it as activism.
I think that's a really good question. And, you know, I think changing narratives is really the core of PR work. I think the difference in using it as activism is our intentions, right? So working to change narratives in the interest of social and environmental justice. I think that makes it activism. And also doing the work in a way that it's rooted in solidarity with grassroots movements and people who are really leading change on the ground and in their communities. You know, I think that honest PR work is really about creating authentic reality and then communicating about it in a way where the action comes first and the talk comes second. And I think historically, public relations work is sometimes about not changing narratives, but manipulating them. And so, you know, using public relations to cover up bad actions, or running a company in a way that is you know, less than ethical and is not actually what people are going to be delighted to kind of hear about and make people think strongly about the brand. So historically, PR has been about kind of like, well, how can we? It's sort of a code for psychological manipulation of the public. So it's changing narratives in bad faith, whereas I think an activist approach is recognizing that the status quo is unjust and changing narratives in good faith to try to help people understand stories that are, you know, otherwise marginalized, you know, and otherwise not really given the attention that they need, because there's a vested interest by people with the most power and resources to keep things the way they are, right? And squash
Exactly.
stories that are about kind of lifting up people who feel the brunt of injustice.
So the challenges with that, what's the biggest challenge that you face as a director of public relations, particularly for activism, when talking about animal advocacy and veganism and any initiatives that, you know, are at the core?
Yeah. Well, I think one of the biggest challenges is inequity on a lot of different levels. I mean, in terms of, you know, again, the resources that are put into dominant narratives versus the resources that entities like, you know, the kind of groups that we're involved with, even Dr. Bronner's, who's a mid-sized company, and compared to most grassroots groups, oh, you know, an income of 180 million a year, you know, staff of 300, that's you know, a significant difference. But then you look at the people we're up against, the monopolies and the billions of dollars behind, you know, like animal industries and things like that. I mean, it's hard to not feel like the work we do is just like a drop in the bucket, right? And easily countered by all that. So I think that that's a big challenge. And also, I think there's a thing on the messaging side with vegan and animal advocacy movements where, you know, there's the challenges, there's the external challenges we're up against. But I think in the movement itself, we don't really talk enough about how activists ourselves can play into the misunderstanding. And so it's very easy, I think, to kind of set up our subcultures as activists in a way to where we can kind of play into some of the alienation that we experience in the culture.
Yes.
So one way I think this comes up is like focusing on a single issue perspective versus a holistic perspective. So if vegans are seen by the public as people who are, you know, kind of narrow-mindedly focused on this one issue in a way that doesn't take into account other social justice issues, then that's going to further stigmatize us. And I think we see that, unfortunately, a lot. I'm a huge fan of your work because you don't do that. You show up in a way to where, you recognize the intersections of all the different issues that are at play when we're talking about animal rights and veganism. And unfortunately, I think, a lot of the groups with the most power in the movement aren't quite there yet. And so there's this, when I think having a single issue focus is fine. If you're an organization that, we're singly focused on trying to end factory farming or get people to eat more plant-based food, that's fine and actually strategic, but don't do that at the expense of making it harder for other causes to advance themselves. So for instance, if you're doing vegan work in a way that alienates people who are doing anti-racist work or environmental work, it's sort of like being on a tennis court and just like volleying the ball. Anytime the ball comes your way on a certain issue, you just hit it back, and then you let the environmental activists deal with it, or you let the anti-racist activists deal with it. And so I think what that ends up doing is stigmatizing these movements in the culture, and people don't necessarily always see us as allies. And so we just all kind of stick in our, silos.
Right. Right. And I agree with that. I had talked about, I did the keynote at the Animal Rights and Vegan Advocacy Summit in DC last year. And I talked about that. I'm like, we're working less than 10% of the population is vegan. And it really is less than 5%, to be honest with you. If you bundle in the vegetarians, then, you're at 6-7%.
Yeah.
And I'm like, we're all in this infighting, but we got more than 90% of the population that we need to be, talking to and educating and getting people to, go vegan, and fight climate change and all this stuff that's damaging the earth and our bodies and the animals. And I don't have time for it. So Ryan has just, got me into publicizing Black Veg Society right now. So you're tuning in to Naijha Speaks. Please subscribe, like, share, and comment. Naijha Speaks is a project out of Black Veg Society. So please support us at blackvegsociety.org. Black Veg Society is meeting people where they are, right where you are, doesn't matter where, on your holistic health, vegan and plant-based journey. So non-judgment, we're supporting it all at the intersections, and we like all culture, hip-hop culture, skateboard culture. Like we're just trying to talk to everybody. So we appreciate your support, and Dr. Bronner is definitely a supporter of our work, and we appreciate you for that. Thank you, Ryan. Yeah. So having said all that, what are some tips that organizations and businesses doing activism should stop or start doing when it comes to public relations? I mean, I consider me into public relations with Black Veg Society. I mean, I put some press releases out. Is that enough? What else should I be doing?
Yeah, well, I wanted to say one thing on the challenges side, because in addition to a lot of the communication strategy work that I do, one of the things I get to do, which is a real passion and pleasure, is help Dr. Bronners around directing funds in the animal advocacy movement. Again, one of the ways we met. And one of the things you see in the funding side of the professional animal advocacy movement is that it's really kind of a microcosm of society at large, where most resources, most money and power is really concentrated in the hands of a few people and organizations.
Yes.
And because of this, there's a larger majority of organizations that are really struggling to get the resources they need to do their work. And of course, like in society, a lot of this breaks down disproportionately along lines of race, gender, class, et cetera. And so a tip I have for people who are in the funding space, and I feel like I can never say it enough, is really trying to prioritize giving to unlikely recipients of philanthropy. It's one way to help shift the paradigm. We see money as a form of energy to use to power a better world.
Yes.
We need to take great care of it, to not waste it or misspend it. And I think that there's an inclination to give to organizations that already receive the highest amounts of funding, or that are the most frequently recommended by giving advisors or charity evaluators. And those aren't actually the groups that need the money the most or that can do the most good with it, because there is a ceiling in our movement right now on how much you can really do with an amount of money.
Right.
So I think there's a lot of a small group of overfunded organizations and a really big group of underfunded organizations. And I think that is that's the thing that's kind of on my mind about how we can build stronger movements through viewing funding in terms of more equitable distribution of resources. On the communications side, I think that I think one main tip that I have for folks is that it's little can go a long way. So if you don't have a lot of resources to invest in, like putting out press releases and contacting media, starting small and trying to, do what you can, especially in the interest of like really figuring out who low-hanging fruit might be of people who are working in the media space, people who are really kind of open to maybe, a pitch to be a guest on a podcast or writing a news story about a particular thing, trying to really kind of lean into that, because generating those kind of opportunities give you kind of a foothold to start to build off of later as your resources grow. And you can't really underestimate the power of just putting something out there. And it often leads to other things. I think one of the things that I've realized over the course of my career has been that, social change work is definitely a marathon. It's not a sprint. Sticking with it, you see really interesting things evolve and happen. And so I think a lot of times the dialogue about vegan and animal rights movements right now are that, we're not changing the world fast enough. But if you've actually looked at the last 20, 30 years of this work, you can really see decidedly like how much we've actually penetrated into the culture and real change has happened. So people, I think sometimes even activists get down on ourselves of like the low amounts of people that are vegan or vegetarian or that have stuck with it. But the reality is night and day, like we've come so far. I mean, we are not stigmatized as a movement in the way we were even 10 years ago, let alone 20, 30 years ago. And change is happening. And so I think that we do need to take a long-term view, and we do need to realize that, sticking with it, even when it seems like the returns are not as impressive as we'd like to be, things do change.
I agree. I agree. And I can give you two examples. I mean, Land of Kush, and anyone doesn't know, Land of Kush, I co-own that with my husband. We're celebrating 12 years as of January.
That's amazing.
And I remember when we were the only Black vegan soul food restaurant in Baltimore, and we would get a lot of press, and we're still getting a lot of press, without work, just very little work. And people just see us as a restaurant, but we are a social enterprise. We're putting out events, co-founding Vegan Soul Fest, which is on its 8th year this year, and Maryland Vegan Restaurant Month that evolved from Baltimore Vegan Restaurant Week, which is happening in March, to Keep It Fresh, to Naijha Speaks, to, so there is this growth happening, although, we see the numbers as being small in terms of people that are vegan or coming in and out of it. So I can't agree with you more. Yeah. And you say vegan now, it's you hear it in the movies, on TV, you see it everywhere now. And that wasn't the case years ago. So there definitely is change. Ryan, what would you be doing if you weren't doing this activism work? Because it's just so naturally you. You know how they say authentically you? This is you. Well, what else would you be doing?
I don't know that I would be doing. I don't know what else I'd be doing. I mean, honestly, these days, I've got a little bit of a workaholic in me, and I probably work a bit too much. I talk about work-life balance. I don't know that I have it. But I also feel like it's the activist work I do, whether it's paid or unpaid, it is really what I know. what I love. But I love animals. I love cities, nature, cooking, riding bikes, music, comedy. All these things are things that fuel me. But I think that working towards positive change against exploitation and oppression of people, animals, and the planet, that's my focus and my passion. And even if I was able to do something else, I think I would try to, bend it in that direction of trying to, I love culture that, intersects with trying to change. I mean, again, your restaurant is a perfect example of that. I love going into spaces like that and feeling like, like you said, it's a social enterprise. And it's when I was growing up, I first became vegan in 1997, and we had Soul Veg in DC on Georgia Avenue. And that was for many years, the Black owned, Black soul food restaurant, vegan soul food restaurant in DC. And I learned a lot about food and culture and met so many great people through that place. And then for years, I had to go to Baltimore for the Natural Products Expo East, which is a really great event, but it's bright fluorescent lights, kind of a stiff kind of corporate culture. And I would just love the moments where I got to escape to go to Land of Kush, to just chill out and be around an environment that felt more familiar. And I think spaces like yours, like the way you're able to kind of subtly create a place where, hey, people can just go there to get delicious food, but they're also getting kind of an education and a different way to be, different way to run a business, different way to think about, food and what is food and what's not food, and how good it can taste, especially when you leave oppression out of the equation. It's just so amazing. So.
And getting the employees involved, because none of our employees are vegan. So
that's really
they're there, they're learning, they're bringing it to the community because people are asking, what is this land? You know what I'm saying? So it's all ways to do activism. There's a lot of questions and comments coming in. I mean, me and Ryan were just having a great conversation. I'm sorry. I see you there, Tom. It's great that you're tuning in. I appreciate it. You need more soap. It hasn't been on sale. That's a whole nother topic, Tom. We'll be here for another half an hour talking about why things may or may not be on sale. So I love the eucalyptus too. A rich person can simply donate money surrounding a cause in order to ease their conscience. Okay, awesome. Yeah. And oh well, John, thank you. Not aware of any progress surrounding the USA dumping plastic in the ocean. Okay, well, you got to do some more work around that. You have anything to say about that, Ryan?
Well, as Dr. Bronner, I mean, we're absolutely concerned. The plastic packaging issue is actually probably the thing we hear most about from consumers right now on changes they'd like to see us make. And it's tricky because, you can't use a glass bottle in the shower. We did pioneer use of PCR, post-consumer recycled plastic. We do have some really interesting packaging innovations that I'm not allowed to talk about yet, but later this year, in coinciding with the 75th anniversary, around the idea of like celebrating the past, we're also looking to the future and how we need to evolve and how we need to change. So we're going to actually be introducing some really cool packaging innovations around Expo West this year. And then we're also doing a lot more refill stuff with stores. It's funny because in the like between the 60s, 80s, 90s, refill of soap in co-ops was like a really big deal. And then it sort of fell by the wayside. And now we're trying to figure out, more and more people are interested in that, how to bring it back. So that's a small way we can help the plastic dumping issue. So
awesome. Tom, getting companies to go for free is a legitimate concern. Yes, it is in this day and age. Why are we still, using fur? So another issue that needs to be worked on. Thank you for congratulating us on our anniversary, Tom. There's just so many coming in. Ryan is such a, okay. This is Lars, we can end with this, I guess. Can you give a few advice for starting local PR communication bureaus in their respective countries, cultures, languages to increase PR work for activists that usually don't have the resources to add PR work? Thank you. And that's a good question for me too, because I'm still learning.
Yeah, absolutely. So this is a question about in outside the US in particular, seems like.
Yes. And he
Yeah.
also followed it up with how do you get funded to start and use your skills as a PR specialist? Yeah, we might have to have a part 2, Ryan.
I think, one of the ways that I've got involved in this work, and I think is really sweat equity in terms of funding and doing the work, being willing to kind of work for free, which is, it's a kind of a controversial topic in the freelance world, that people shouldn't be expected to work for free. And I think that's true. Big corporations shouldn't expect people to work for free. But when you're an activist, having that grind and that kind of hustle to work for a bigger cause than money can actually give you the foothold to eventually make money off it. And I also think connecting with local media activists, in most places these days, there's always somebody else kind of doing the work that you might be interested in doing yourself, or doing more of, or doing in a different angle. So I think just reaching out, networking, meeting other folks is a great way to get going. And if you have a true vision and plan for something, the more people you meet, the more you kind of put out the ideas. There may be companies like Dr. Bronner's that are a little more resourced and that are actually willing to work with somebody who's like-minded. Because a lot of the PR firms, again, that are out there, I mean, we search for PR firms around the world all the time, and we have some great partners, but it takes a lot of digging to find people who think about doing PR as kind of, honest and authentic narratives versus the sort of, well, how can you do one thing and then tell the public the other, which again is like the most of the PR. And so it's challenging. We definitely need more companies like that. So hope that helps, but good luck in those endeavors. Yeah.
This will be the last one because it has to do with Dr. Bronner's. Thanks for tuning in, Bernadette. I usually buy your soaps by the gallon jug, getting hard to find. Any suggestions on where these might be available?
We hear that a lot. I think right now we're actually started. I just saw an Instagram post yesterday from our social media team that I think we're selling the gallon jugs online now. But local co-ops usually stock the bigger sizes. So that's a place to look, like local old school health food stores. I think maybe even Mom's Market in the DMV region. But yeah, the drbronner.com website is going to be offering more of the bigger sizes too. So check there.
Thank you for that, Ryan. Ryan, how best can we connect with you? All one, everybody. Please thank Ryan for being here. We appreciate you. All one, Dr. Bronner's Movement Media, Public Relations as Activism. How can we connect with you again?
Yeah, absolutely. So a couple things. wearemovementmedia.com is the Movement Media website. drbronner.com is the Dr. Bronner website. At Dr. Bronner on all the social media channels. Those are the best places. I do some writing about the vegan movement and philanthropy analysis on Medium. So searching something like Ryan Fletcher vegan Medium, you'll probably find those articles. And I also just want to do a shout out to the In Context podcast from the LGBTQ-led Vine Sanctuary. They're talking about, it's a really similar to this show. It's just an amazing outlet for discussions with different kinds of activists working on intersectional perspectives. So I very much, that's hosted by Patrice Jones. We're big supporters of Vine. And then, I also want to note that the Stray Dog Institute is putting out some great writing on concepts like trust-based philanthropy, which really complements some of these ideas about trying to get resources in the hands of folks who are have less access to them. So they're another great resource to check out. But definitely check out all the Dr. Bronner Movement Media stuff. And yeah, thank you again for this opportunity. Again, I always enjoy talking to you, and this has been really great way to kick off this Thursday. So thank you.
Thank you, Ryan. Thanks, everyone, for tuning in. Again, naijhaspeaks.com. If you're watching the replay, please share, like, comment, subscribe. Tune in Thursdays at 11. That's when we go live. Have a great one and stay